On February 7, 1984, a scientist aimed a spotlight at an approaching light in the Norwegian sky, and the light moved away. He turned the spotlight off. The light stopped. He turned it on again. The light moved away again. This happened 3 times, and it was logged in the official field record. Welcome to Untold Lores, what the instruments recorded. Part 2 of 4. Project Hessdalen ran its primary field operation from January to February of 1984. In that 5-week period, the team recorded over 100 separate instrument-confirmed observations of the phenomena. Not eyewitness accounts. Not photographs alone. Simultaneous readings across multiple independent instruments confirming that something physical was present in the valley. The data was unprecedented. No research team had ever produced this volume of simultaneous multi-instrument documentation of an unidentified aerial phenomenon under controlled scientific conditions. The researchers were methodical. Every sighting was logged with time duration, estimated position, behavioral description, and which instruments had recorded data. The logs from that period still exist and are available to researchers today. On the night of January 26, 1984, a luminous object was observed hovering at a consistent altitude above the valley floor for approximately 37 minutes. During that period, the team's magnetometer recorded a measurable fluctuation in the local magnetic field that corresponded precisely to the object's presence and ceased the moment the object departed. The fluctuation was not consistent with any known meteorological or geological source. The object had created, or was associated with, a localized magnetic field disturbance. On January 30th, a researcher named Odd Gunnar Arvid captured a sequence of photographs of a luminous object using a 35mm camera with a standardized exposure setting. When the photographs were developed, they showed something the naked eye had not clearly resolved during observation. The object had a distinct internal structure. The core was intensely bright, but surrounding it was a less luminous envelope, and within the envelope there appeared to be a darker region. The photographs were analyzed by optical physicists. They concluded the object was not a point source of light, not a reflection, and not a lens artifact. It had physical depth, it had layers, it was structured. On February 3, 2 members of the team simultaneously observed a phenomenon from separate observation posts positioned 4 kilometers apart. Both researchers independently described the same object behavior: a large luminous orb that split into 2 smaller orbs, maintained separation for approximately 90 seconds, then merged back into a single object and departed at speed. The 2 written accounts, filed separately at different observation stations without prior communication between the researchers, matched in every detail including timing, direction of separation, and duration of the split. The probability of 2 witnesses independently fabricating identical accounts of such a specific and unusual behavior was, in the team's own assessment, negligible. The lights were exhibiting behavior. Behavior implied motion control. Motion control implied either a propulsion system or a natural mechanism of extreme precision that science had not yet characterized. Neither explanation was satisfying. Neither explanation was complete. The researchers documented what they saw. They filed what they measured. They did not speculate in their official reports beyond what the data could support, but in personal field notes, which were later published, Erling Strand wrote one line on February 4, 1984, that stood apart from the clinical language of every other entry. He wrote, "It is aware of us." The basis for that statement was documented. On multiple occasions a luminous object had been observed approaching an observation post and then stopping, not drifting to a stop, stopping, holding position, remaining stationary for a period of time while the researchers observed it, then departing. This pattern was recorded on 7 separate nights during the field operation. On February 7, a team member aimed a high-powered spotlight at an approaching luminous object. The object immediately reversed direction. The team extinguished the spotlight. The object stopped. The team activated the spotlight again. The object reversed again. This was repeated 3 times. The team's log entry recorded the exchange without interpretive language. The facts were the facts when the spotlight was on. The object moved away. When the spotlight was off, the object held position. Strand's personal note for that night contained a single word: responsive. When the 5-week field operation concluded in February 1984, the team returned to their institutions with over 50 rolls of film, hundreds of pages of instrument logs, magnetic field recordings, spectral data, radar logs, and radio frequency readings. The analysis took months. The full scientific report was published in 1985 under the title Project Hessdalen, a summary of scientific observations. It ran to several hundred pages. Its conclusions were carefully stated and deliberately conservative. The phenomena were real, physical, measurable, and unidentified. No conventional explanation fit the combined data. No natural phenomenon known to science matched the full behavioral and electromagnetic profile of what the instruments had recorded. The report was peer-reviewed. It was not contested. It was simply received by the scientific community and largely set aside. The lights, of course, did not stop, and in the years after the 1984 field campaign, as researchers began returning to the valley with increasingly sophisticated equipment, one detail from the original dataset was quietly re-examined. During the 1984 field operation, the team's radio frequency analyzer had recorded anomalous signals on several nights. These signals had been logged and set aside as unexplained interference at the time. When communications engineers examined those recordings years later, they identified a pattern in the signal structure. It was not random noise. It was not standard radio interference. It had a repeating mathematical regularity. No one could determine what had produced it. No one could determine what it meant. When engineers fed the signal into analysis software decades later, the software returned a classification that stopped the research team's conversation in its entirety. The signal bore a structural resemblance to a narrow band encoding format, the kind used to carry compressed information. That's it for Part 2. Follow Untold Lores for Part 3. Like and subscribe for daily stories.